Okay, we're going to call the Board of Directors meeting to order. First thing on the agenda are the consent items with the minutes and the treasurer's report. Any concerns or looking for a motion? Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Budget.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. We're starting out with the Northwest Community Television Board meeting first. Normally we do the commission meeting, but Chairperson Glick has a plane to catch to Europe or somewhere here in the great U.S.
Just East Coast.
Just the East Coast. Okay. So she's predicting long TSA lines, so she said, if I can go first, that would be great. So with that said, you have the budget packet in front of you, the 2019 proposed budget. Of course, we've got the table of contents of all the different things we'll be talking about here, and I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible. The main thing I want to talk about to start out with is kind of our mission and vision. Again, our vision statement is, we're here and we want to be a dynamic media resource known by all in our member communities, which informs and inspires public engagement. And our mission, of course, is to help others create and disseminate high-quality local information. And I think you're all aware that we've got a great staff, or blessed with a great staff here who produces high-quality local content through all different sub-brands that we have here, whether it's news, sports, cities, or create. We serve and be a mirror of the communities as they evolve and change. Of course, we've been witness to all kinds of history here over the last 36 years since our organization first started doing video programming. And so not only are we, covering all these things, we also are doing these history programs that, have been very, very popular. Currently, we're working with the city of Plymouth. This will take several months at least, if not longer, to put that together, but we have gotten the ball rolling on that end. Certainly, we offer the public opportunities to produce programming, and we support our commission member communities by providing media content production and delivery. And one of the exciting things is that Dave Kaiser has been working closely with our city communication coordinators to get these CCX media links on all your websites. That to me is a very exciting thing that I mentioned before. I think we only have one city to go, and that's New Hope, and the only reason New Hope isn't hooked up yet is I believe they're finalizing their new website. And so once that is done, we'll get a link established on there, and that's a great opportunity for each of your residents to simply, go to the website, hit on the home page, hit the button, and watch all the aggregated content that we put together about your city. And I think Helen Lefebvre said it the best to me the other day. She considers our organization like an arm, like a communication arm of their city. And that's kind of like a goal we wanted to achieve, like where you can rely on us as a partner to help you disseminate information in many different ways. So, and we've got the staff and the resources to do that and to do it well. And the communities have been changing, obviously over the years. Like as an example, we just produced a series called Dialogue on Diversity. Hopefully many of you have seen it. If not, you will see some clips of it. Dave will show those at our November meeting. But every city should have gotten that. It was a 4-part series on how diversity is affecting in our cities in a very positive way and embracing diversity in our communities. So that's very exciting. We also produced a whole section on mental illness, which is a very hot topic right now. It's coming more out of the closet, so to speak, and becoming more a subject matter that we're talking about. And so the news department just did it. When I saw that segment, actually it was a several-part series. I'm going, wow, this is something that you would see at network level. That's how good the quality was. So if you haven't had the opportunity to see that all those links are on our website, or we would have sent them to your Gov Delivery link on a Monday. All great programming. Again, we're built to identify, produce, and deliver this high-quality content, and so we're very excited about that. You see our 10-year targets there. We are going to look at that down the road and update these for you as well. A lot of them have been achieved. Certainly, going forward, we're looking more and more at the financial aspect of the organization, so that will be a big focus going forward. On the next sheet, we talk a little bit about the compensation goals that we've had for many, many years here to, try to attract high-quality employees and remain competitive in the labor market. And so we have a great group of employees here. Minimal turnover with this organization, which is great. It's a good sign of your leadership and approving these budgets that help make this organization run. And I've seen a lot of similar type organizations that have a lot of turnover, and that's not always good. So I'm just glad we have a great and stable staff. Revenue and expense outlook from 2018 through 2025. Cable subscriber revenue, again, back in 2008, we had cable subscriber, a number like 74,331. We peaked at about 76,976. And then from 2011 to 2018, we're down to like 68,493. Of course, this, up to this point, and we actually predicted this time frame would happen. We're at what we call the tipping point. So if you look, if you want to go a couple pages in, you'll see the subscriber graph, which is always, we've been showing the trend line for a very long time. And that shows subscribers from 2008 to 2018. And even though from 2010 to roughly 2017, there was some massive, decline in subscribers, the increases in cable rates made up for any losses in subscribers. But now we're at that tipping point where revenue is less. So it's at that we're not going to get as much revenue because the cable company can only charge so much more money, and I think that's like one of the core problems is if you keep increasing the prices, you're going to get more people to go off the system. It's pretty logical, and that's why they're going into these other things like over-the-top TV and something we're exploring right now. We have a beta test on like Apple TV and also Roku and those types of things to be prepared for the future. And again, because we want to be known by all, we have to have these delivery methods that reach everybody, not just part of the northwest suburbs, but all of the northwest suburbs. So with that said, you would think by looking at this, you'd go, well, gosh, no one's signing up for cable TV anymore. But that's not true. I mean, we're actually every month there could be several hundred or 1,000 plus subscribers hooking up to the system. The problem is what's happening is there's a greater number disconnecting than connecting. But we're still fortunate in this area, especially in some of the developing suburbs still. We still have, like Brooklyn Park, Plymouth, and Maple Grove still have some land to develop through. So, we're seeing obviously increases there. And then there's also people who, for whatever reason, they will disconnect cable and think like the grass is greener on the other side and try some service, and all of a sudden it's buffering or the quality isn't there, and then they go back to cable. So, but again, at this point in time, the numbers keep going down, but it doesn't mean that people aren't signing up for cable. So I wanted to really make that clear. They are. And I did read a report not too long ago that they think this will start to slow down now. Again, time will tell. There's all these, prediction makers and, the think tanks that kind of look at all this. But, we'll see. But regardless, we have to be prepared for less money. As we see the trend, we have to be prepared for that. So that's kind of a big, message. What I'm trying to say here is that that tipping point will and does affect our budget. So the franchise fees, of course, are affected, and with the community television fee that we get, which is roughly $1.36 per month per subscriber. Again, less subscribers, less money coming in for what we call that PEG fee. We are predicting about $25,000 in additional revenue from some advertising, tape dubs. I don't even know why we call it tape dubs anymore. That's an antiquated term because it's typically all on DVD. And there's various production work that we might do for hire. Interest earnings roughly 1.5%, and Paul Hennon will talk about that a little bit later. But for the period of the projection, we have quite a detailed spreadsheet that we always provide you each year. We estimate that our operating expense within this scenario, we're going to decrease it by 1% per year starting in 2020. Now, granted, we had a higher percentage of cable subscribers and revenue for this 1 year, but then again, I think what we need to do is kind of sit back and take a look at what's going to happen over the next year. See if it's still a steady flow, or will they stem the tide? Things will start to settle down in terms of the number of decreases in subscribers. So, but I thought it was important to put like negative growth into the budget to start out with, rather than a positive growth, because we've always had positive growth. So this will be the challenge going forward. And believe me, we spent a lot of time on this budget and looking at what to do. But overall, there's like a 0.08% decrease in the combined operating budget for 2019. Let me move on here. All the budgets are in there, and I think, I don't really want to take everybody's time to go through every line item here. I will say, on kind of the big items, though, on salaries, para and FICA, we're looking at a 1% increase in the budget. And then we've been doing some kind of like reorganization within when people leave, we always look at, like, we actually had a couple of retirements this year. We always look at ways to, like, well, how do we reposition ourselves? This is an opportunity to try something different. And so with some of those savings, we would take some of those savings and put that into an increase for the employees, and that's spelled out in the narrative here. And what we're proposing is a 3% increase total. And I did a survey of all of our cities, every one of our cities here, and that is just about exactly what everybody is proposing for their cities, because it's something important that we like to follow along and not say, hey, we need more than the cities or anything like that. So it's an annual survey that I conduct, and so that's where we sit, and that's what I would like to propose for this next year. No increases in health. Many years ago, that we did have some higher numbers compared to other cities, although we're starting to catch up there, but we're not quite there. So we've frozen our budget for on health for quite a few years now. So that's good. Other than that, I don't know does anybody have any, without me going through every line item, does anybody have any questions? Because I do show a lot of decreases on here. As you can see, you'll see there's a lot of things decreased. And even on the revenue projection sheet, I even had to, get creative with all of our capital expenditures as well. And I had to decrease some of those in light of the fact of less money coming in. So, again, like I said, this next year will be very telling, and so we'll know more and keep an eye on it. And with that said, as I said last year, we have in this year's budget to have like a consultant help us with talking about like various ways we can fundraise, look at other operations around the country and see what they're doing, whether it's grant writing, monetizing, video through advertising or things on YouTube. There's a lot of opportunities, just general, if somebody could write a grant, those types of things. We have some people on this board too who are involved. In fact, there's quite a few of you who are involved with other nonprofit organizations, and you all do various fundraising techniques and that type of thing. And so we'll be looking at all that and getting people involved and discussing that over this, starting towards the end of this year and then early into next year, and hope to come back, I believe, at the May meeting with a full report on, like a plan on what to do. But again, what I'm proposing here is conservative, and I want to just take this next year and see how things go, and then when all is said and done, we'll have like a better plan down the road in terms of what to do if the funding keeps going down. So, can I answer any questions for you at all? All right. Well.
So then we're looking for a motion to refer this to the Budget Committee?
Correct.
So move.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, informational items?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. We're going to save our normal, because the commission meeting is filled with a lot of very important things, especially on our legal update side and all the things happening at the federal level. We want to make sure we have enough time for that. So the normal staff video reports will be held until the November meeting. There are a couple important things I did want to mention, though. On the Policies and Activities Committee met back on August 20th. I want to thank Marcia Glick, Kirk McDonald, Ann Norris, and Sue Ellen Zagrabelli for attending that meeting. Basically, we talked about various issues. One is hours, staff. Again, it's nothing that's in our official rules or the board said, we've got to be open these hours. This is just something that was staff driven. And up to this point, we've been open till like 11 o'clock at night. And the bottom line is, that's too late for an organization like this. And, there's just like one or two people who come in every so often. And in the meantime, our staff would work on other things. But we want to close at a more reasonable hour. Our staff did a survey and found out that most of the centers close anytime between 8 and 9 or 9:30. And so we think it's that we want to get in line with that. And then certainly any hours saved there would be put into helping our nonprofit organizations do programming or helping others with various things. So this will not have any effect on our, on our programming at all in terms of create. And so the committee agreed. I mean, this is not like an action item, it's more of an informational thing. The committee agreed it's something we really should do. And then going forward into next year, we're going to look at some of our rules. We're going to get the committee together, look at how we handle suspensions of studio and equipment privileges, figure out, what is a good pathway to get out of a suspension, when all is said and done, or not to get out of it, so to speak, but what is the pathway to end your suspension? And so we'll be talking about that with the group. And we also talked a little bit about promotional and public service announcements. We get requests every now and then from various organizations to play their spots, and it's just a matter of setting up some rules there. So I just wanted to inform the full board that we'll be taking a look at that with the Policies and Activities group and reworking all of our rules. They're about 10 years old now, so we figured now will be a good time to kind of look at it and update those. The other thing is, just a quick thing about where there's the Board of Directors election for, we have several representatives on this board, Zipporah, Scott, and Cheryl, who come from the producer ranks, and so somebody's position is due up, and so there will be an election here up for that board seat. And then quickly, obviously speaking of elections, Shannon provided a memo here about all of our election coverage. We've got approximately, or contacted at least 100 candidates, get this, 100 candidates for local office who serve in your, or are running for office in your areas, and we're getting as many as we can. I think we're up to 85 or so already on recorded. We bring them, some of you have actually been through this process. I've already seen, well, in the past, we bring them up to the studio. They get about 45 seconds to say whatever they want to say. They could read a teleprompter or try to do it without a teleprompter. Teleprompter is always recommended, though, certainly. And this is a great opportunity for people to see what candidates have to say. So we're very excited about that. And Dave and his staff do a great job of getting those links out to the right places at the right time. I even believe they end up on your own city's link. So if somebody wants to know about, say, the Plymouth candidates, they can just click it on and then see the candidates there. So it's really great. We'll be doing quite a few political forums and our news coverage. We typically will do a story on regarding what happens, and then we'll do live election night coverage. We'll do a recap of that at our November meeting, but we just want you to know that we're in election mode, and there's people coming in this building constantly telling your residents why they should vote for that candidate. So it's a great service. That's like community TV at its finest. So, and the other thing is we're trying to update our picture directory. If you have time after this meeting, there'll be some people who can take some pictures. We want to include that in our annual report. We have quite a few of your pictures already in there, but they're taken off the internet, and sometimes there's sizing issues and and that type of thing. So between now and our November meeting, we hope to get as many people with a just quick head and shoulders shot as possible. And of course, finally, the statistics are back there. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Anything else? Otherwise, motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Good morning. We'll call the commission meeting to order. The first item, 2 under the consent agenda, minutes and treasurer's report. Are there any adjustments to either one of those? If not, I would ask for one motion to approve both of them. Motion been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Next item is presentation of the 2017 audit report. Do you want to start out by saying something?
Sure. I would like to introduce Andrew Berg from Abdo, Ike and Myers. Their firm has been doing our audit for a number of years and doing a great job. There was one finding in this audit. When we were doing the remodel project, one of our project, if any of you have been involved in remodel project, you had change orders and all kinds of things, and one of them got caught. Basically, what we should have done is put some furniture items within a separate thing, but because, to make a long story short, because we did these automated tops which allow employees to either stand or sit, the person doing the construction work wanted those to work with, and so that's why we had to put it in that other area. But as you all know, especially executive committee, when we're reporting at the end of the year in terms of our dollar amounts and things, I negotiate everything. Everything gets negotiated, even beyond low bid. And this organization, has saved a lot of money with negotiations. In fact, we just did one the other day where we're waiting to hear back, but this one company wants, I don't know, like $16,000 or $17,000 for. This is through a bidding process and low bid on a project, and I'm saying, well, we need to do better than that. So I just highly recommend to all people who are doing purchasing at cities is that even though you get a low price, there's always could be a lower price. But with that said, I've got Wendy keeping track of all the various bidding in separate files. The auditors recommended that. And, it was kind of a fluke and won't happen again. Take it away, Andy.
All right, thank you, Mike. As Mike said, I'm Andy Berg with Abdo, Ike and Myers, here to go over the 2017 audit. I know in front of you, you have the hard copy of the management letter. That's what I'll walk through today. So turn to open the document there on page 2. Starts with our responsibility. So what we're hired to do is give an opinion on your financial statements. We give an unmodified opinion or clean opinion, so the best opinion you can get. Pleased to report the audit went really well this year. We do appreciate all the work that Mike and Wendy put in and enjoy working with them in the organization. The second section on that page is called significant audit findings. If we did have any audit findings there, they would be reported. Like I mentioned, a unmodified report and no audit findings to report. Turn to the next page. We do also test for a number of different areas of Minnesota legal compliance and issue a report there. As Mike pointed out, there was one finding related to contract and bidding. He kind of explained that, so I won't go into any details. You can see in the management response there, I do believe that the organization has put in policies and procedures to avoid those types of findings in the future. You can see on the bottom of that page there was one legal compliance finding last year too, which was resolved and no longer reported as a finding. So now I'll jump into some of the financial information. So if we turn to page 6, what we give you here is the ending fund balance over the last 5 years in the commission. So the blue line's your ending fund balance. We give that as a dollar amount and as a percentage of the next year's budget. So you can see in total the fund balance increase up to about $5.3 million, up from $4.7 million. If we compare that to your 2018 budget, it's at about 90.5%, which is an increase each of the last 3 years in dollar amount and percentage. On the next page, we give you a budget to actual comparison. for the commission and the Access Corporation. The commission's on the top there. See, the revenues came in at just under 5.7 million, over budget by about 194,000. The main variance in the franchise fees being over budget by 188,000. Expenditures under budget by about 58,000. You do transfer out to the Access Corporation. You budgeted about 4.9. You transferred out about 4.5. So you transferred out about 385,000 less than anticipated. Total fund balance increased 541,000. On the bottom of that page, the budget to actual for the Access Corporation. Here the revenues are fairly small at about 32,000, with it being funded with the transfer in from the commission. Total expenditures at just under 4.9 million, really close to budget, only a $6,200 variance. Here's where you see the transfer in, about 4.5 million. Some disposal of capital assets for a decrease of about 375,000 in the ending net position. The ending net position ends at about a $2 million deficit, which you look at that and you're like, a deficit. The main reason for that deficit is, I talked about this in the previous years. I think we're on the third or fourth year of implementing an accounting standard related to pensions. The organization does participate in a multi-employer pension plan, PARA, which all your cities do too. So at the end of the year, the organization recognized a net pension liability about 2.4 million, which is the main cause for that deficit there. In addition, there's about 475,000 of compensated absences recorded too. Have we looked at some trend information on page 8? Here we give you some 3-year trend of the revenues and expenses over a 3-year period. And the top one, there's your revenue. The actuals are red bar. The budget's a blue bar. So you can see there, really close to budget each of the 3 years, with the actual coming in slightly over budget. With the expenses, again, fairly close to budget. Actuals, the red, and again, the budget's the blue. So you can see in 2015 and 2017 you were under budget, and in 2016 just a little bit over budget, but relatively close in each of the last 2 years. Page 9 just gives you a 2-year history of the revenue by source. You can see fairly consistent over 2016 and 2017, with franchise fees making up the majority at about 77% in 2017 and 76% in 2016. Page 10 gives you a 10-year history of your total revenue, franchise fees and access fees. You can see over the 10-year period that has remained fairly consistent as a percent, the franchise fees, and has gone up. As Mike was talking about in the board meeting, you know, that could have trends going down or potentially going down. So I think, you know, looking at this historical information is good, but it's good to hear when Mike's presenting not only the 2019 budget, but looking out into the future to make sure the organization's, you know, secure financially. So that's good to hear that. But this gives you a 10-year history of where they've been. I think the combination of this and looking out in the future is good for the commission to do. And then the last item I want to point out on page 11, we do list a number of new accounting standards. I want to point out 2 of them. The first one, there's GASB statement number 775 related to other post-employment benefits. Currently, you're reporting those under GASB 45. This is going to be required to be implemented in the 2018 audit. So there we just recommend working with that actuarial maybe a little earlier, because they're going to have to do that study under these new standards, which they're well aware of and may have already contacted you too. And then the second one is on page 15, related to leases. This standard won't be implemented until 2020. Probably not a huge effect on the organization, but you do have some leases of equipment, so we will want to evaluate that as it gets closer to the time. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, I guess you can't come here without a question. You talked about that standard. You talked about the fact that our deficit was largely a result of having to account for future pensions. When a person retires early, is there I know there's probably not a significant effect, but is there a positive or negative effect on what our projection is for how much pension money we need? In other words, if somebody retires early, do we get a little bit of a gain because she or he isn't going to get a full pension?
That's a good question. My guess is that since the pension plan's a multi-employer pension plan and covers all, cities, counties, other organizations like the Cable Commission in there, and you're getting your net pension liabilities calculated based on your contribution under state statutes and gets allocated based on that proportionate share. My guess is if you see someone retiring early, you're not really going to see an effect on the commission's financial statements. In theory, it may help that at the pension level.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'd like to have a motion to approve the 2017 audit.
So moved.
Motion's been made, seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is the budget. You want to speak any
Oh.
further on that?
Yeah, unless anybody has any question, or thought of any questions between the last time we presented it 10 minutes ago until now, certainly we'd need this group to recommend that it be brought to the Budget and Executive Committee after this meeting.
Any questions pop into anybody's mind between the last presentation and now? If not, we could have a motion to,
I'll make a motion.
motion's been made, seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next item is the 2018 investment report. Paul?
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try and speak loudly, I guess. It's kind of dull in here. But we've made, I don't know if you've read the report, but we've made some rather significant changes to the portfolio. And I can go through the first paragraph, and then I'll bring you into some of the other items that led to those changes. But as of now, the total valuation is $2,054,807, and that's going through the month of August. And the annualized return through that period was 0.45%, and we'll look at that. The current yield on the cash flow is approximately $56,000, or 2.7%. This isn't expected to change anytime in the significant future, and I'm having a total projection of about 1% or slightly above that for 2018. And most recent comments by the Federal Reserve is that they intend to continue to be restrictive and possibly raise Fed funds rate. And I'll show you in a minute what changes we did to the portfolio. But if you went to the second page of this report, second to the last page, I should say, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of what took place over the last year. Short-term rates actually increased about 1% from a year ago. Yeah, Mike.
Are you referring to this graph here?
No, I'm referring to this, it's called the Treasury Security Yield Curve.
Okay, the yield curve.
It shows that a year ago, short-term rates were about slightly like 1.25% for a 2-year, and they bumped all the way up to maybe 2.5%, and it's almost to the point where we have what's called an inverted yield curve. And that's where short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. And usually, when that happens, banks don't make money, and many times, 7 times out of 10, it is somewhat shows that a recession may be coming in the future, but nobody knows. But I just want to we took advantage of that, of that yield curve of rising rates. And what we did is we made advantage of the yield rate. We made a significant reduction in interest rate risk. We made a significant reduction in credit risk. We also established a more consistent total rate of return on the portfolio in the range of 2.25% to 2.5% in the foreseeable future. And the return, this return is net of all fees, which is 0.5% of all assets under management. Now, most of this was achieved by what's called, we structured what's a laddered direct bond position. In the past, we were in short duration mutual funds, and that was the best place to be because interest rates were so low. But now, because rates have gone up, it allowed us to take what's called a position, and we took about 1.2 million of the funds and placed it in FDIC certificates of deposit and United States Treasuries. So I placed 8 positions of $150,000 each into 2, 3, 4, and 5-year yield maturities. That allows us then, in 2 years, we'll have what's called a rolling bond portfolio. So we'll actually then, in 2 years, that one will mature. Then we will roll that over into the next 5 year, so that we'll create what's called a rolling bond portfolio that will give us a 2.5% to maybe 3% return over the years. So this is our best. We're taking advantage of a rise in rates, and for the first 6 months, the portfolio actually didn't make anything because a rise in rates, bond prices go down. Well, we were fortunate enough, our duration was so short that it didn't affect our portfolio. So we took advantage of that. So going forward now, I can say with much more certainty that we're going to have locked in yields of anywhere from probably 2.25% to maybe 3%. It depends on what we go forward on. So then there's also, so every year, $300,000 starting in year 2 will mature, and we'll roll that over in the 5-year position. There's a remaining $700,000 that are still in short-term funds, money funds, but they're not affected. Their duration is so short, and they're still yielding about almost 2%. So I want to keep that position the way it is. And then finally, for diversification purposes, you can look at the last page. I placed an institutional real estate income fund which yields about 5.25%, and this is private equity. This would be like pension funds that invest in these private real estate equity funds. It is a mutual fund. It is liquid. We can get out on every quarter, so it's something that we're not locked in on, and I'm watching that, but I'm putting that as kind of like our position where we're getting about, in the past, it's 5.25% current yield, and also then there's about a 2 or 3% growth in because of the increase. So it's a diversification purposes, and it should keep us ahead of inflation like what real estate usually has done for us in the past. As noted earlier, the management fees are 0.5%, or approximately $10,000. And I'm projecting that the yield for 2018 is going to be about 1%. It didn't make anything the first 6 months, but now we've got some 2.5% stuff coming in, so that's how I'm projecting that. One other thing, I just want to make a comment. We cleared through what's called Pershing Corporation, and they have a very efficient bond desk that prices us. So that means that because we clear through Pershing, their markups are very little, if any, and they get the highest yields on the street. So we're very well taken care of in terms of pricing. So I don't know if there's any other questions. Does everybody have any questions or any advice or any comments? No?
I'm not giving you advice.
Well, I'm open for them. Yes, Mike?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to say that Paul has done a good job, because we were looking at last year's numbers, and I just want to thank Paul for basically this immunization, so to speak, of this laddering approach, because it does make sense. You'll notice, if you remember, I was going through our long-term revenue projections. Again, I do those things conservatively for reasons. For instance, on interest earnings, I put 1.5%. Now, Paul is saying here he could get potentially 2 to possibly 3%.
Going forward.
Going forward,
Right.
which is, and the projections are for going forward into
Right.
2019 and beyond. And so, so that's good news, to hear him say that, with our conservative estimate of 1.5. So, again,
Well,
thank you.
I think that what I want to stress is that we've actually locked in now rates over the period because of rates have gone up. Bond portfolios are some of the trickiest things to try and manage, especially if you, to put it in perspective, if we would have had long-term duration funds out there, and a rise in 1% would drop the portfolio by 10%. So that we, if people that are out there with these long-term bonds, if rates go up 1%, their portfolio is going to drop by 10%. That's how sensitive this stuff is. So, and that's why we try to keep things short when rates were down there, and now we're just taking advantage of what's out there. So, any questions, advice, or comments?
Nothing? I'd like to have a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made, seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Information items. Mr. Bradley, you've got lots of stuff for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson reminded me to speak as loudly as I possibly can, so I will endeavor to do that. But if I falter, make sure you raise your hand and ask me to speak up. So what I did for this meeting is I prepared a legal memorandum to give you an update on, a variety of different telecommunications issues that I thought would be of interest to this commission. And I thought this morning what I could do is highlight a few of those in my presentation now. We can go to the next slide if we would. So the first thing that I'd like to cover with you all is really an update on future competition in cable. And so many of you have probably heard by now of the upcoming rollout of the next generation of wireless services called 5G wireless. And you'll also hear the term small cells because small cell facilities are used to deliver these new services. When you talk about small cell facilities, the word small does not relate to the size of the actual equipment or antennas or anything like that. It refers to the area in which an antenna can serve. It serves a small area, and so that's why they're called small cell facilities. But the reason why it's important to a cable commission, why 5G is important to a cable commission, is because the next round of competition in cable may very well come from the services provided over 5G. And just recently, Verizon had announced that they were entering into a partnership, at least with some initial test markets, to provide a video service through YouTube TV. And if any of you are familiar with YouTube TV, one, you should become familiar with it because it's going to be one of those issues that we're facing down the road here. But YouTube TV looks a lot like cable. Right? It has local channels, it has news channels, it has sports channels, and it's an over-the-top service that you can get now with, with a robust internet connection. So Verizon's partnering with YouTube TV to provide those services in its bundle of services. So just be aware that that level of competition is coming, and so if we know that, we need to be wary of how that impacts cable franchising, whether or not that type of service should be franchised like a traditional cable service. We can go to the next slide, please. And when you're thinking about how the services are regulated and how it compares to cable service, really, when it comes right down to it, they're fairly similar in method of delivery. The real difference is how the last mile is served. And if you remember what the last mile is, it's getting from the pedestal to your house. And with wireless, you're going to have fiber facilities, wires, in your public rights-of-way, feeding these antennas that are a lot of times located on streetlight poles and utility poles. And instead of having a wire going from the pole to your house, it's going to be delivered, the service will be delivered wirelessly into your home. But with 5G, if you haven't heard already, 5G is going to be a very robust type of broadband product. So it's going to be able, if the reports are true, deliver gig internet service to the home. So you can see that with that kind of robust broadband capability, new services that we don't consider wireless necessarily, we kind of think of this as the wireless. But if 5G comes to fruition, like the wireless industry is having us come to believe, we'll be looking at our TVs, at our things in our house that we're using for those types of services. So just be aware that is running in the background. 5G still has not been, the standard has not been developed. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be constructed in order to bring 5G to the home. But we're being aware, we wanted to make you aware that this is probably the next line of competition to traditional cable. We can go to the next slide, please. Obviously, kind of like what I've been saying is with the rise of 5G cable, that could put pressures on cable franchise fees in the future if that service isn't treated as a cable service. And so I think there's probably a lot of reasons why you would consider that to be a cable service. But that's going to require some advocacy on franchising authorities' parts. And so this slide goes over some of the franchising advocacy that we would recommend all of you following. The first really is to educate yourselves about the importance of local cable franchising, why this body regulates cable franchising, understand that purpose, and maybe kind of refresh yourself on that over the next year, so that everybody is really kind of remembering why it is that we're meeting here to talk about the regulation of cable television. Once we do that, then we can educate our other local officials, our other city council members, so that they understand, and then working with other local government advocacy groups like the League of Minnesota Cities, like MACTA, and the National League of Cities and NATOA, those types of organizations. And when we do that, and we kind of have that kind of base knowledge, we have that initial advocacy with those agencies, then we're able to, I think, effectively communicate then at the state and federal levels of government. And of course, participate in relevant FCC documents and dockets. And one of the things that we just did on behalf of the commission was we filed a notice of ex parte letter with the FCC, and that's before you on the dais here. One of the things that the FCC has created a number of dockets, that have been preempting or have been looking to preempt local government. And so part of the purpose of our letter was to say, well, really, when you look at the Minnesota experience with preempting local government in the small cell realm, if the purpose of preemption is to foster rapid deployment of 5G wireless or small cell facilities, it's really not happening as a result of preemption. And so what we did is we set up a survey that the League of Cities ended up using as well, so that we could poll our clients to see, since the small cell legislation in Minnesota passed, and the idea behind that legislation was to allow rapid deployment of small cells, that we should see a lot of development, right? Because it's been over a year and it's been a year and a half now, roughly, since that legislation passed. And so when we looked at this area, for example, out of the cities that responded, only 2 cities had even an application for small cell facilities. And of the 2 cities that had applications, there were only 3 applications. And this is the second largest franchising authority in the state of Minnesota. We had 3 applications in 2 cities. So the point of the letter was, if the legislation preempting local government is to foster that deployment, it's not happening in Minnesota, and we don't think that that's a valid point or a valid position to take by the FCC in preempting other local government actions as it relates to 5G wireless. Next slide, please. So in addition to the dockets that we just filed in, there's another docket that will be that we believe will start up here in the end of September. The FCC released in the beginning of September a draft notice of proposed rulemaking, and this one relates to cable television. And if you remember, back in 2006 and 2007, many of you were on the commission at that time. And for those of you who weren't, let me just give you a brief explanation of what happened back then. There was 2 different declaratory rulings and orders that related to Section 621 of the Cable Act, which is in part relates to competition in cable television and how you treat competitors coming into the marketplace. So we called those orders the 621 orders. Those 621 orders also addressed franchise fees and how to treat certain in-kind contributions that are received through franchising, and whether to treat them as essentially advances on franchise fees or as an ability to receive on top of your 5% franchise fee. Those 621 orders were appealed, and 2 years ago, one of the U.S. Court of Appeals circuits ruled against the FCC and remanded the matter back down to the FCC. And so now, however many years later, 10 years later, we're hearing this, we're having this come up again. This FCC has taken a very different position, I think, than we've seen in the last 30 years. We have, we meaning franchising authorities and the cable operators, really have kind of come to an understanding over this period of time as to what's a franchise fee and what is allowed in addition to the franchise fee as far as what you might call it in-kind consideration. In-kind consideration is could be an institutional network. It could be a fiber or cable line from a city hall to the master control center. Really any number of things. And so this FCC has said anything that is a non-monetary assessment on a cable operator is really going to be considered part of the franchise fee. And the only thing excluded would be PEG capital costs incurred in or associated with the construction of PEG access facilities as franchise fees. That's a really limited, the FCC is really initially reading this in a very limiting way. And as you can see from that slide, there's a lot of different things that could be included in the definition of in-kind consideration. And so it could have a negative impact, not just on this franchising authority, but on all the franchising authorities in Minnesota, especially the Twin Cities. Yes, sir.
So if this rule goes through, I suppose we should notify our partners, the school districts and people that are getting things, so that they can put forth their voice and object to this if they don't like the idea of losing their free benefits. And secondly, does it come into effect immediately, or can we argue that, no, we had a contract with you when you started this franchise or renewed this franchise,
Right.
and you can't get rid of our contract until it expires?
Mr. Chair and members, it's a great question. And so there's a lot of unknowns, and it's part of the importance of making some of these comments. A lot of these considerations are also negotiated outside of the franchise. So sometimes these there'll be settlement agreements that are put into place as well. How are those treated under these rules? Are they all considered franchising commitments, or are they considered something else? So it's a good point, and frankly, I don't know the answer right now. And I think those are the types of things that we would need to raise in a comment period. But it's a good point. Any other questions on this particular topic? I think this is an important topic. I haven't recommended that we participate in a FCC docket with formal comments, but I think this one is worth our time and effort to do that. There isn't anything that you need to do now. There's no action item right now. It's an information item. If the FCC takes it up at the end of September, the notice of proposed rulemaking will set forth when the comment period begins, when the reply period begins, and none of the clocks start ticking until the notice of proposed rulemaking is published in the Federal Register. So probably at our next Cable Commission meeting, we'll be able to give you an update on exactly, or with maybe more detail on the notice of proposed rulemaking, the timelines, and then what we propose for comments, if that makes sense.
And Mr. Chair, Mike, do you also, from what I've been reading through NATOA emails and things, that if something like this actually were approved by the FCC, that there would be quite a number of lawsuits moving forward? Would that slow the process down?
Mr. Chair and members, the first step is going through the rulemaking process. And then you're right, there probably will be lawsuits filed depending on how the FCC acts, one way or the other. Either the local governments will be bringing the lawsuits, or the cable industry will be bringing the lawsuits. And then, you know, this last one took 10 years to kind of work through the system. So it can take some time, but you know, we don't know how it's going to play out exactly right now. Okay. There's been some more regulations relating to small cell. I just wanted to make you aware of that. This is in addition to our state legislation that, like I said before, was passed about 1.5 years ago. There were changes to the the poll make ready rules in August. And then there looks like there's going to be additional local preemption by the FCC and new shot clocks, meaning new time periods in which local governments have to act, and they may be more restrictive than existing state law. So just be aware that that is on the docket for the FCC to take action for at the end of September, and then we can give you an update on that at your next meeting. The next slide, please. And this slide really relates to the letter that I've already talked about. So there's a number of dockets that were looking at preempting local governments. We've responded to that. That letter is in your packet, and a number of Minnesota jurisdictions also submitted ex parte letters, as did the League of Minnesota Cities and MACTA. They filed jointly yesterday. We'll go to the next slide, please. CenturyLink TV update. You know, as you probably know by now, CenturyLink has really not performed well in the Prism TV, cable TV market. There's been conflicting reports on whether or not they're still providing Prism TV. When we were at NATOA, we asked specifically at a roundtable whether or not CenturyLink was still providing Prism TV, because there was industry reports out there saying that they were discontinuing the television product. And we were told that those reports were incorrect and that they were providing Prism TV. Although, when you dig down into it, the only way that you can get Prism TV today, and I don't know if this is still true or not based on some of these other comments that have been made, but was you would have to call CenturyLink, not only ask for video service or cable service. If you just ask for cable service, you're going to be directed to DirecTV now rather than Prism. You have to specifically ask for Prism TV, and you have to be willing to pay what they would call their rack rate, meaning an undiscounted rate. And so when I talk to CenturyLink officials, my comment is, well, who in their right mind would do that? So you're essentially not providing Prism TV. When we got back from NATOA, I was talking to one of my colleagues in the office, and I shared what CenturyLink told us, and he goes, I was just reading the transcript from the second quarter earnings call, and I'm pretty sure the CEO said we're discontinuing the service. And so that's the quote here in the middle of the page, and basically the CEO says, CenturyLink isn't looking at services where they lose money. We just want to focus on the products that make money. And as a result, last quarter, meaning first quarter of 2018, we noted we were discontinuing our linear cable and over-the-top consumer video products. So I followed up with CenturyLink after that, and this was after NATOA. And I said, your CEO said you're discontinuing the video product. Who am I to believe? And initially we had a call, and it went, well, we're gonna talk, Mike, and then they canceled the call. So anyway, we're going to work with CenturyLink. That's the bottom line. They have a franchise here. It's disappointing because I think a lot of franchising authorities in the Twin Cities were excited to finally have a competitor in the marketplace, and I think subscribers and citizens were happy to hear that there was competition in the marketplace. So it's disappointing to see this competitor discontinue the product. And what that means to the cable franchise, we'll have to, that's what I'm going to be talking to CenturyLink about is, what do we do with the franchise? It seems to me that you may be in violation of the franchise since you're not even trying to sell the product anymore. But we'll have those conversations and we'll report back to you in time. Okay, next slide, please. There's some federal legislation that I just wanted to make you aware of. There's a federal Senate file called the Streamlined Small Cell Deployment Act. It's an act, not unlike really the Minnesota state legislation that looks to preempt local government in the small cell application process. The bill doesn't have any hearing scheduled, but I just wanted to make you aware that it's out there. Federal net neutrality legislation has also been circulating in Congress, but I'm not completely convinced that it has a chance of really passing, but we'll see. Then finally, state legislation. A number of other states besides Minnesota have passed small cell legislation. I'm not sure any of those bills are any better than what the Minnesota bill was, which means they weren't very good. Several states have also looked at net neutrality legislation, including Minnesota. There was 2 bills last session introduced on net neutrality, but they didn't progress past. I'm not even sure if they got hearings, but they were introduced. And then finally, cable franchise fee legislation. I've heard from some colleagues in Wisconsin that the traditional cable operator in Wisconsin, the primary one, Charter, is now talking to legislators about eliminating the 5% franchise fee for cable television in Wisconsin as part of the conversation about small cell legislation. So it's something to definitely keep your eye on to our neighbors to the east. And I'm sorry for the length of the update. I know it's long, but there's a number of things that were floating out there that we thought you should be aware of, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mike? Jim?
With respect to the drone policy and
Yeah.
ordinance, in Plymouth, where I work and live, we're going to be talking about the city council. So I wonder if you'd be kind enough to provide me a copy or send it to our city manager so he can have it and share it with our council before we have our study meeting on that
Sure.
topic,
We
which is
have
coming
to.
up very shortly.
Bill?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
Very informative.
Yes.
Anything else to come before the commission this morning?
Some communications here.
Oh, we got communications, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, just very briefly, we made some slight changes in the agenda, have like a communication section, because we get all these various letters from Comcast and just different things that we get through email. And I just wanted to make sure that, again, in trying to keep the commission up to speed, I've included some letters from Comcast on various things they're doing, including expanding internet essentials for our veterans to try to give them low-cost internet, which is very good. And then there was an interesting piece from remarks from FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr about the future of 5G and what it's all about. And we hope to, as more meetings go on, explain more about what 5G does. At the NATOA conference, one of the best things that I experienced there was a demonstration by T-Mobile of the future of smart cities and that type of thing, and I'll talk about that at our next meeting. But 2 quick things. I want to thank Comcast for working quickly with the city of Robbinsdale. They opened up a new municipal liquor store, but they didn't really have they desperately needed high-speed internet for all their processing of everything within their new liquor store, and they moved up the schedule a whole month to accommodate the city of Robbinsdale, and so that was very nice of them to do that. So I just want to publicly thank Comcast for doing that. And I also want to thank Nancy Werner, who is the general counsel. I just went off the NATOA board. I was one of the national board members. But I will say this, this is our new general counsel, and she is doing such a phenomenal job in working at the federal level She's got a lot of energy, and she's on top of it. You know, Mike and myself, and we're very familiar with what Nancy does. In fact, she put together this information here this literally came after 5 o'clock last night. This is a shared document from NWCT, the National League of Cities, National Association of Counties, National Association of Regional Councils, and everybody else in between that went to the FCC. So she's doing a phenomenal job. Mike's doing a phenomenal job on staying on top of this. And, you know, I think we all have to fight the good fight going forward, because we have never, ever seen this type of as much activity. You know, Mike was apologizing for maybe going too long. Trust me, there's so many things happening now. It's just absolutely unbelievable to try to stay up with it all. But we've got a good team at the national level and the local level following these things on your behalf. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Anything else to come before the commission? Jim?
Just one quick question. Is the 5G concept in place someplace other than the United States?
I think it is in other countries.
Well, it's developing. The standard still is not set anywhere in the world, but it's expected to by 2020.
Thank you.
And what I saw of 5G, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit next month, and what I'd like to do is actually put together more materials that we could share with all the city managers, your council members, because I think there needs to be a little bit more education beyond the legal part of it all, but exactly what will it do? What does it look like? Because I will say this, if this T-Mobile truck and display that they had went out to every city, and I said this to some of our NWCT board members, I said, if this rolled out to every city and they did a little demonstration about 5G, every city council member, every mayor is going to go, when can we sign up? When could we have this technology in our town? Because there's lots of little things you can do with putting little sensors everywhere. And I mean, I'll just give you one example. They were talking about putting sensors in municipal garbage cans that would tell you if the garbage can is half empty or totally empty. And if it's totally empty, the truck going to pick up the garbage doesn't need to stop there. That's the kind of things we're talking about. All kinds of issues, you know, high speed, like Mike was talking about, just the unbelievable gig speed. And we'll talk about that more in the future. So, but it's coming, and so we're all going to be prepared for it one way or another.
Okay, the Executive Committee and the Budget Committee will meet right after this meeting. I'd like to have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. What's that?
Move it along.
Yeah, we're done.
Oh.